Hopefully you guys can hear me because I'm trialing a different type of microphone. We all have to live in the mundane. The mundane pays the bills. But as Jessica Andrews Hanna said, instead of being constrained by the here and now, humans have the unique ability to disengage from the external world and turn our thoughts inwards to that which we find personally significant. Through mental simulation of our past, future, and the minds of others, we travel far beyond the observable. So let's travel beyond the mundane with a little bit of science and a lot of art. Those who have not experienced nature in all its beauty and therefore have not developed feelings of respect for it will be more likely to pursue their own short-sighted interests according to the principle, after us the deluge, without regard for nature and grandchildren. This can be counteracted by information and explanation, on the other hand, and by creating an aesthetically informed consciousness of the beauties of organic nature, on the other. When living in the mundane day-to-day, nature is the answer. I'm sure you've heard this so many times before, but let me give you a new perspective. There are other worlds around us. Too often we pass through them unknowing, seeing but blind, hearing but deaf, touching but not feeling, contained by the limits of our senses, the banality of our imaginations, our palmaic certitudes. There isn't just one form of nature. The world is so uniquely beautiful and wondrous. We just need to open our eyes to it. I'm not talking about green fields and blue skies and wide beaches. These natures are obvious to us. These are the natures we're probably dreaming about when we're plodding along at another report at work. Invisible cities are a dream that originated in the heart of uninhabitable cities. I'm talking about the invisible cities that are all around us. With every single breath that we take, we are part of nature. Our mundane lives can be fueled by the soulful knowledge that we are nature ourselves. The most recent newborn, the latest being to open its eyes, whether it's a human or a whale, a dragonfly or an oak, is made of matter that inhabited this planet before the appearance of any type of life whatsoever. Its body is older than its species or family, and yet it can change the history of the cosmos forever, only in a much later moment of its true existence. Nothing that gives it life comes from the place in which it was born. Its ancient atoms have traveled throughout the universe. They come from places that no longer exist, and they will be destined for places that have probably not yet emerged. So let me introduce you to 3 different worlds of nature, 3 invisible cities that are in your everyday life, that you can take in your mind and your soul to help you trudge through your everyday mundane. The first is air. Air is the element in which we live, a platform shared with all other living beings, which marks every moment of our lives. Every breath is a complex universe containing billions of molecules flying faster than sound and colliding with one another, millions of times per second. I know air doesn't sound too romantic or wondrous, but this is where artistry really has its purpose for us day-to-day people walking through our lives. Works of art made by human hands are devoted to the service of communication. The artist turns to his fellow human beings with his works, be it for their moral improvement or instruction. Aria by Thomas Saraceno shows us such a wondrous form of nature through air. Thomas sources from the mundane to create this wonder, to create these works. It's through the mundane that he becomes inspired. From the paper filters that show us the particulates that are polluting our air to spiderweb sculptures that we would see in our own homes, he really uses such a diverse source of works to present such a uniquely wondrous world. He really builds a world in this collection. Personally, as an arachnophobe, I never thought I would connect so well with a work of art that's about spiders and has spiderwebs everywhere. But there was something about just the intersection of science and art within his work. I mean, he goes through engineering, physics, chemistry, biology, as well as sculptural and collage. Just so many different mediums and so many different sources for his inspiration. It's a really fascinating collection to walk through. So spiders and spider webs actually have a long connection throughout history with tradition and specific cultures. So in Cameroon, in Central Africa, they practice spider divination, or what they call namdu. So there are traditions that are known as the Mambila traditions that are primarily performed in the Somi village in Cameroon. They do everything from this spider oracle divination tradition to there are rituals and dances that can span a 2-year cycle as well. So these traditions are very spiritual and they're also very divine. You know, these things have been going on for generations and generations. So to this day, these divinations and these other rituals are still performed. So the spider divinations in particular, they use a Heteroscodra craspus. That's my attempt at Latin. I'm sure it's horrible, but it's basically a type of tarantula. I'm only going to put the name up here for you to search it because it can be kind of creepy looking at it. Maybe that's just me, but I can't do spiders. And this one's a particularly large spider. So it's within this tradition of Central Africa with the spider oracle, the spider divination, that Thomas introduces the spider web sculptures. He has a deck of tarot cards, but it's based off of a spider oracle rather than the traditional tarot cards that you would usually see. He states it's an invitation to attune to symbiotic possibilities. It celebrates the radical interconnectedness of all things, both living and non-living. So these spider oracles, it's through their web that they know all and that they can speak to you as well through the vibrations of the web reaching out and touching everything. So they are connected to all things, and you'll actually find that even science has some basis in this notion. So Professor Fritz Vollrath of Oxford University Department of Zoology, he actually states, the elegant physics of these webs make them perfect active filters of airborne pollutants, including aerosols and pesticides. So these webs physically can connect with even the smallest particles that we can't even see them, but the spider is feeling them and they know of them. So this great capacity to filter pollutants out of the air is just a testament to how predisposed they are to be vessels for communication. So within one of Thomas's artworks called Sounding the Air, that's part of this collection, I'll put a photo of it here, but it's actually a moving work and it has music to it as well. So effectively, the spider web moves just in the atmosphere of the air. The tiny particles that are hitting it and moving it and swaying it, our own breath changing the direction that the spider web turns. You know, when you talk to it, it can pick up the sound and it will move, and it creates this sound, just as I'm sure you've heard plants singing and mushrooms singing. Spiderweb also actually makes a sound, we just can't hear it. And the movement is from this both seen and unseen parts of our world, and it's showing you an invisible world within this mundane one that we live. I know this is a really mundane visual, but certainly here in Australia I see these strings of spider webs every single day without fail, and now when I see them it's like a little glimpse into a deeper life, a deeper part of nature that I too am a part of. The second world I want to introduce you to is to do with plants, but it's more to do with the interconnectedness between all forms of organic life. So the first thing that I want to read is actually a little snippet of a short story where a man is describing how when he laid amongst the trees in a forest, he could feel their emotions. Before I panicked, there was a serenity. I couldn't take it in then. I didn't realize how big it was. To know the whole daylight after all, and the whole night, all the winds and the lulls together, the winter stars and the summer stars at the same time, to have roots and no enemies, to be entire. Do you see? No invasion, no others, to be whole. So this experience that he's describing, it's just really the fact that we are nature. There is no other. It's all of us and everything, the whole picture. So two neuroscientists, Marcuso and Monica Gagliano, they surmise that plants are actually thinking and feeling beings. I just want to read you this little excerpt that kind of explains how we know that plants are actually connected and that there is thought to the fact that they have feeling and emotion. They are all interconnected both by the root node linkage and by green epiphytes in the branches, a linkage of incredible complexity and physical extent. Why, even the prairie grass forms have those root connectors, don't they? I know that sentience or intelligence isn't a thing. You can't find it in or analyze it out from the cells of a brain. It's a function of the connected cells. It is, in a sense, the connection, the connectedness. So through the very ground that we walk on, we are part of the whole world. There is no other. We are part of the whole. The true world is gone. Which world is left? The illusionary one? Perhaps. But no, we got rid of the illusionary world along with the true one. So these illusionary worlds that I'm introducing you to, these invisible cities, are part of the true world. Once you open your eyes up to them, they are just as real as our mundane lives. So to continue with this interconnectedness, this invisible city that I'm introducing you to, Italian plant neurobiologist Stefano Mancuso, he explained that as stationary beings, plants have had to adapt a balance with their environment, including with their predators, from whom they are not able to run. Through a dispersal of organic functions throughout their entire bodies, instead of discrete organs with specialized functions, brain for thinking, lungs for breathing, stomach for digesting, etc., these mechanisms are made uniformly diffused across the plant. An animal model of distinct organs would leave the plant completely vulnerable, dying as soon as the first critter came along to eat even a small portion of the plant. Survival for the plant is dependent on decentralization, a principle it also applies outside of its body into the community relations. After centuries of failures stemming from hierarchy and disunion, we find our survival is dependent upon it as well. So in this interconnected world, hierarchy is no longer a concept. It can't be a concept because then survival isn't possible. We're enveloped by a world that, for its own survival, it lives, dies, and lives again. It sacrifices part of the whole for the survival of the whole in its entirety. If survival always involves others, it is also necessarily subject to the indeterminacy of self and other transformations. We change through our collaborations both within and across species. The important stuff for life on Earth happens in those transformations, not in the decision trees or self-contained individuals. Rather than seeing only the expansion and conquest strategies of relentless individuals, we must look for histories that develop through contamination. Thus, how might a gathering become a happening? So this ideology playing out on a botanical stage creates a really interesting political and cultural perspective. So perhaps in our connection with these invisible natural worlds, we'll start to make changes in our own mundane lives to have happenings and create community, interconnectedness. Not only are we nature, but we are returned once again. We are whole with nature. The political and effective possibilities this opens up for us are endless. As Labour notes, a world composed of objects does not have the same type of resistance as a world composed of agents. To this, Galeano has added, when asked of how her life has changed through her scientific study, the main difference is that I used to live in a world of objects, and now I live in a world of subjects, and so I am never alone. So the third and final world that I want to introduce you to is microorganisms as a whole. This world is built off of the things that we physically cannot see. They are everywhere in our day-to-day lives. And this world has been brought to life not by a contemporary artist, but in fact by a scientist, an evolutionary microbiologist to be exact. So Ernst Haeckel, our scientist in question, he had to document all of his findings in microbiology through illustration, as photography had not yet been invented and certainly not been utilized on a micro level. Haeckel provided a picture of nature's entirety, which contemporary physics seemed to lose sight of in its formal operations. Contemporary physicists of the time did not strive to gain an overall picture of the world. Quite the opposite. They increasingly lost such a view. They were dependent upon recording their findings in formulas and in abstraction, which led to lose sight of the whole of nature. So Haeckel was actually really unique for his time. The detail and the style that he depicted within his works were stunning and groundbreaking. And I believe that this is because he blurred the lines between science and artistry. He was both a scientist and an artist, under the guise of being just the scientist alone. Science and art, the highest cultural achievements of humankind, are often mentioned in the same context, as they represent different ways of viewing the world. On the one hand, reason and objective understanding, which through unbiased observation and experimentation are employed to investigate the laws of nature that underlie the innumerable manifestations of animate and inanimate nature. On the other hand, the artist who employs skill and imagination to create works that awaken aesthetic sensibilities in himself and in others. Haeckel at the time faced a lot of controversy for his drawings. Art Nouveau was a new style that was coming out at the time, and you can certainly see that in his drawings and in his depictions of nature. Other scientists at the time were saying that he was manipulating nature to make it fit into this art style. It's been stated that Haeckel's concept of nature is a concept of culture. It's my personal belief that he started as a scientist with the pursuit of accurate observation and scientific discovery, and as he went on in his career, he just fell into the beauty of the natural world and in these microorganisms that he alone was seeing, that how could he not create wonder, and with his soul he slowly became an artist. Now, artists and scientists really aren't all that different. It's been found that they actually use the same areas of their brain, because whether you're a scientist or whether you're an artist, you're observing something and you're trying to see it for what it truly is. To me, it's really just the medium that they use. An artist paints and a scientist writes a report. Both are seeking the truth, both are observing. Artists resemble scientists in their endeavor to seek out a better world. They feel beholden to all that is good, truthful, and beautiful. And on their quest for the final truth, it is not uncommon for both to lose sight of reality. As I'm introducing you to these invisible worlds, I'm sure I sound like I'm losing sight of reality, and I probably am to some extent, but it is my belief that to walk through the mundane life, to pay the bills, you need to lose sight of reality sometimes. You need to see the beauty and the wonder that's all around you. And Haeckel himself actually answers to this criticism. Our human knowledge is undoubtedly limited. Certain limits are inherent in our knowledge of truth, owing to the innate organization of our brain and to our sensory organs. Kant, another scientist, was indeed correct in his critical theory of cognition, in that we are only ever able to perceive the appearance of things, not their innermost unknown nature, which he describes as the object in itself. He is nonetheless mistaken and misleads our conception of nature when he thus questions the reality of the outside world and maintains that it only exists in our imaginations. In other words, that life is but a dream. Effectively, yes, there are worlds that we cannot see, but they're not present only in our imagination. They're not a dream, they're real, and they're all around us. We just need to know that they're there, to choose to see them. For anybody that doesn't follow art or doesn't think of themselves as someone who enjoys art, I understand that it can be really overwhelming and quite pretentious, to be honest. I think the art community is really exclusive these days, and I don't agree. Art is the fare of the complete human being. It is a basis for existence, a medium of life, and since art knows no exhaustion, an eternal life without exhaustion. For in art, creativity knows no bounds. It's my belief that art has a true purpose in our everyday lives, and you don't need to create it, and you don't necessarily need to understand it to reap the benefits of art. Art, it pulls us out of the mundane that's in our everyday lives. And you can't avoid the mundane. It's like brushing your teeth. But art makes those sorts of things bearable. It shows you new worlds and new perspectives. It gives you drive and inspiration and wonder. Without it, we would just be mindless machines. Sentience without senses. Blind, deaf, nerveless, moveless, some irritability, response to touch, response to sun, to light, to water and chemicals in the earth around the roots. Nothing comprehensible to an animal mind. Presence without mind. Awareness of being without object or subject. Nirvana. If anything has inspired you in this video, here are all of my resources, and they will also be in the description. Also popped in some further reading. I personally really want to read Invisible Cities. If you also believe that nature or returning to nature is where our true happiness and serenity lies, then please feel free to follow along. I really love exploring this topic through science and art. So in my last video, I explored the functions of the brain that actually help us to process information and turn it into future sight or plans or creating a successful life through idle time, which is effectively doing nothing, and our brain functions in this way. You just need to give yourself the right fuel. But thanks for watching through this one. I hope you liked this new perspective from an emerging artist, myself. I actually want to put in a little tidbit here. So these videos, along with some additional research that I do, are actually going into a monthly newspaper. So this is the first edition of my newspaper, and the idea really is that you get to fuel your mind with these sorts of topics and this research and this artistry and science in a really consumable way. It's really accessible information. I'm trying to remove the pretentiousness around art because I think it has such a beautiful purpose in our lives. I'm sure I'll see you around. Hooroo.